Okay, so introducing the new project for really the next 2 weeks, but it's going to be split up by front end and back end. And this week we're just responsible for the front end, right? So what does this look like? We have a site called Spammer, and this is hosted on Render. This is unfortunately the old version of the project. I did create a new project that I was excited about, but still working through some bugs. But hopefully I'll get that released. Hopefully today, honestly. Because the old version is hosted on a cloud service that is slow, painfully slow. So it goes into cold storage and then it comes back out when people send it requests. But it's being even slower than usual. Let me see if the back end is working real quick. So Spammer backend on Render. Yeah, sorry. It's just coming out of cold storage. Once it's warm, it runs quickly, but there we go, finally. So what is Spammer, right? You can basically list messages anonymously. There's no login or anything. So you see a bunch of messages and you are able to create a new message. Let me show these side by side as I'm talking through this. So see a list of all messages. These are the specs that you're going to be responsible for this week. So we can see all the messages, right? Post a new message. We just did, but we can do it again. Bye. Delete any message. So this little trash can icon we can delete. Actually, while I'm talking through these, let's use the language of HTTP requests, right? To review the information from yesterday. So this first one, retrieving all messages, what HTTP verb, what action would that be? Is that a post request, a put request, a get request? What do you think, Linjay? Retrieving all the messages from the server.
Oh, it's fetching?
Yeah, it's fetching. But fetch is what we use for
get.
It's a get request, exactly. And how about posting a new message, Izzy? What type of request is that?
Creating.
It's creating, and so the method would be post. Yep. Okay. So when you send these requests to the server in your fetch, you actually have to say the request type, unless it's get, because that's default. So this method would be post. And then delete is kind of easy. What method is that, Maureen?
Delete.
Yeah, the method is delete. Like a message, that's interesting. What do you think liking a message is? What type of HTTP request? Sadiq?
Put.
You say post?
Put.
Yeah, put. So each message is going to have a property of likes, and we're just updating the number of likes. So that's a put request. Yep. Edit a message. So will this work? Yes, this will work. This worked. What do we think about that, Zubida? What type of request is editing a message? Are you there? Okay. We can hear you. But it doesn't even look like you're trying to talk. Ellery, what type of request is editing a message? Put again, exactly right. Post a comment to any message. So, yeah, so we can make a comment to any message. Yay, it worked, right? So what type of request would this be to the server? ZO2?
There's another put.
So this is a post request because we're creating something new. We're not modifying something. So this comment is being created. Yeah. So it's a post request. And then seeing all the comments for a particular message is just another GET request. You're asking the server for all of them. So what I thought I'd do today, well, first off, what questions are there on this overview of Spammer?
Does it have to be exactly what yours looks like?
No, I hope it looks better than mine. Yeah. Okay.
Can we add additional functions or anything to it?
Yep. Yeah. All I need is this for full points. And then you can do whatever you want. And this version is actually harder than what you're required to do. See how these comments have like, you can edit a comment and reply to a comment and like a comment. That's extra work. You don't have to do that. You just have to list the comments for a particular post. But a comment, you don't need to reply to a comment like you can do here. So this is extra credit, what it's showing you right now.
I have an inquiry.
Sure.
Does it mean that we are working with a post message, like as for now?
So you're building this whole front
like
end this week.
The comments.
What?
Like to list the comments, we use the post message tab.
Oh yeah, for creating a comment, maybe the question is, how do you do all these requests? And to answer that, where is it? We have the docs here that tells you how to send these requests to the server. So this week you're building the front end, what we're looking at, but the server is already created for you. And to ask the server to do different things, here's the docs. So to get all the messages, you send this kind of request. To create a new request, or to create a new post, to create a new message, this would be the type of request you would send.
Oh, I get it now. All along, I thought we need to focus on the message come.
So again, we're building the front end. The back end is already built for us. Next week, you're going to be building the back end. But this week, you don't have to worry about that. You just have to follow the docs. But what I thought we'd do together is just start building this together, right? Yeah, so let's do that. So I have a brand new empty Next project here. And right here, hi. So I'm going to change.
Hey, Max.
Yeah.
One question. So, we were doing our project yesterday and we knew to do the async for server side, but what if you were just randomly doing something and you wanted to practice or whatever, but how would you know you would need to do client side versus server side? Because sometimes I've done it to where, and then all of a sudden, oh no, I have to make this client side.
So if are you talking about in Next.js?
Yes.
Yeah, when you're making a component. So you always want to have it be a server component because there's some benefits there, unless you need interactivity. Then it has to be a client component. Because for the client to be able to like click on things and interact with things, the code needs to be running on their device. But your default is server component until you're forced to do a client component. So let's make an H1 spammer, right? And let's try to do the first objective in the specs. So you can see a list of all the messages, just like here. So how can we see a list of all the messages? I want to make a new component that's responsible for showing all the messages. So in my source folder, I'm going to make a new folder for components. And I'm going to call this messages.jsx. And I'm going to make a new component called messages that for right now just returns a div with the word messages. And then I'm going to get this displayed right under spammer. I'm going to open up my console too, just to keep an eye. There's no errors or anything. Okay, so now the messages component, I need to fetch the actual messages from the server. So how can I do this, right? How can I fetch the messages from the server? Semsi?
Yeah, I don't remember the syntax right now.
Okay. So when we're writing on the client code and we want to talk to the server, or server to server actually, we use the built-in function fetch. And then the question is, well, what do we feed into fetch, right? So what do we feed into fetch?
The URL?
Yeah, the URL. And we find the URL from the docs. So the docs are right here. So here's the URL. This is kind of the base URL though, right? So then to get the messages, we need /messages. Except fetch returns a promise, right? Because it's one of those actions that takes a long time. So we want to store that and resolve it with await. But to use await, we have to turn this async. And then the fetch is going to respond with some JSON that we then want to convert from JSON to an object. And then finally, we can console.log this. And this shows up. This is running on the server, so it shows up in the terminal here. And it looks like I have an object with a property of success true and messages, which is an array of messages. So instead of saying the word messages, I want to actually display, let's just say I want to display the text of each of these messages. How can I just display the text of each of these messages? David?
Yeah, so you're going to map through, wait, did we create a state variable?
Do we need one?
I mean, I think so. I think you need to put them into a state variable because it's it's a list of messages, right? It's going to be an array.
Yeah, so we're gonna hold off on using state until we absolutely need to, because we
Okay.
prefer the server component. So
So
yeah,
in this case, it would just be info dot messages dot is there text? Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, you're gonna map through. Info is an array. Okay, so we're gonna do
info's an
info.
object.
Right. So so each one is going to be message. Message goes there. And then fat arrow, and then you're going to just if you want to look at it, console.log message.text.
Yeah, but then I want to return actually the message in maybe a div so we can see it. So just that quickly, we already did spec number 1, right? You can see a list of all the messages. So here are all our little messages. Any questions on that? Okay. Let's work on spec number 2, right? You can post a new message. So I want to make a new component that's going to be responsible for showing basically an input box right here. So actually just copy this component and I'll call this one new message. And I'll change this to be new message. And I don't need messages. Right now, let's just do a div that says new message. Okay, how can I get new message component to show up? Ritu?
You want to import it,
Yeah.
yeah, and it should come up automatically. Yeah.
Very nice. Yep. Okay, so now the new message component is being invoked, but what I want it to be is a little form here with a button. What's your message? And post message, right? So here, I'll make this a form. And I'll do an input box. And I'll do a button. Add message. And now how do I make this a controlled React input element? Farhan. Where's Farhan? Is Farhan here? No. He didn't have this yesterday, so I thought I'd call him out, but no, he knew. He predicted the future. Ketzerin, how can I make this a controlled input?
I think you're gonna have to use state.
Yeah, so we are gonna have to use state. Yep.
Cons text set text equal use state and empty string, I believe.
Mm-hmm. And since we're using state, this code has to run on the client. And then Ketzerin, what else has to go here?
Input is gonna be volume or name. Volume.
Value equals text.
And do you want placeholder in there too?
We can. Yeah, we can enter your message. Sure. So every time I type, I need to save what they're typing in state. So there's one more thing we need for this.
Name, is it that?
Not name, no. Every time the user
On-chain?
types, what?
Is it on-chain?
Yeah. So every time they type, I want to take what they type and save it in our state. So how can we test this? We can console.log text. And now this should appear in the browser because we're running it on the browser. And there we go. But now, when I click add message, I want to console.log adding message. So when I click add message, I want to console.log adding message. Calypso, how can we do that?
Put an on click on the button
On the
Or on the-
form.
on submit,
Yeah.
and then put a function in there
Okay.
that why can't I think on submit?
Well, right here we can console.log hi or anything. But the problem is when I type something and I click add message, we see hi for a second and then it goes away.
e.prevent default.
Yeah, so we need to e.prevent default. Yep.
And then on submit, you wanted to add it to the list, you said?
Yeah, so now let's think about this, right?
Mm.
We need to send a request to the server to add this message to the database.
Mm.
So how do we send this request? Or if we don't know how, what document do we reference to find out?
Go to the API doc and look for the post one.
Yeah, post request for messages. So backend API. So right here. And what we can do is actually just copy this, right? And then talk about what needs to change.
Mm.
So what is our API? Our API URL is this, but we're going to have to do this a number of times in our app, right? So wouldn't it be nicer if we stored this in a variable instead of manually typing it and maybe making a mistake? So what I'm going to do is create a new folder called lib and a new file called API URL. And I'm going to save this in a variable that I can then export. And now, instead of manually typing this, I can just reference it. But then to make a new request to create a message, I need slash messages. So this is going to be slash messages. The method type is post. Headers. What is headers, right? So this is describing the body that I'm sending. So we're communicating in JSON. And then here, it doesn't have a parent ID because this is a post and not a reply. And then the text is not hello back. The text is what?
The state text.
Yeah. So I could do this text to mean this value, or as a shortcut, I can just do this and it means the same thing. So now this is going to return a promise as always. So I want to use async await. And then I have to convert the JSON. And then let's console.log the info to see what happens, right? So we're doing this all in line. This is getting kind of long. We should probably abstract this out. So I'm going to do async function handle submit and take out all this code. And put it in here. And just call this function handle submit, right? Yeah. Okay, so now let's test this out. So we click add message and we got success true our first time. So it worked and it gave us a copy of the message it created. So it created an ID, created at date. The likes start at 0. It doesn't have a parent ID and the text is by. But what do I notice? So there's some things that are not great about my user experience. What do you guys notice about my user experience that can be improved?
The text still there.
The text is still there. That's a good one. So how can we clear the text out?
Set text.
Yeah, set text with an empty string again. So let's save that and let's try it again. I'm going to click add message, but we're going to get an error this time. Never mind. Thought we were. So this time we sent it and the text cleared. So that's nicer. What else? Sorry. What else do we notice that can be improved though?
The message could show up as soon as we add it.
Yeah. So right now I have to click refresh. Okay. Another thing to talk about Next.js, right? So Next.js by default, the fetch request, it only sends it once and it saves the response. So like down here when I'm console.logging info, what is happening? Sorry, not here. Let's look back at our messages component and I'm going to console.log the info of this fetch request and you'll notice something weird, right? So we have an array with the messages, but our by that we created isn't there. But it is there if we just send a request directly to the backend server. Where is it? Backend, spammer backend on render. So if I send a request to get the messages, you'll notice that the by, the new one we created, is here, but it's not. When Next.js does a fetch request, it's not showing up here. Does anyone know? There's a really tricky reason why, but does anyone know why?
Is it only saving it the first time in the JSX? So it doesn't like auto update?
Yeah, when the fetch request, it caches it the first time. So on subsequent requests, it just reuses what it saved. So if the server changes or the database changes, it's not getting new information. This is a really strange default that was decided. But to get rid of this, we can do cache, no store. So it'll send a fresh fetch request every time. So we save that, and now we do see the bye-bye. Let me try to add a message with nothing in there and see what happens. So I'm not seeing anything. But let me console.log info. Okay. So we tried to send this request and we got an error, right? From the server. You must provide a text field. Wouldn't this be great to show this error to the user? Right? So how can we show this error to the user that the server provided us?
Can you do if info.response, I'm sorry, info.success is false? Maybe we could create a p tag, like, oh, maybe we need to create a state called error. So error set error, and then empty string, and then if info is not success, if info.success is not true, you could put you could set the error. Oh, you're doing the p tag first, but
Oh, sorry, you want to set the error first? Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I was gonna do set error with info dot error, I guess. Yeah. And then at the bottom of your p tag, you could just be yeah, you got it.
And then the p tag, what goes here?
It would be error, I guess.
Yeah. Okay, so the user doesn't fill out anything. They click add message, and now the error from the server is being displayed, which is like a nice user experience. What questions are there on that?
Do you have to do the if else? Can you do, like, as I saw one before of using like try and then catch?
No, because this isn't generating an error.
Oh, okay.
This is so the server is responding properly with this object success false and an error message, but it's not generating an error in our code. Yeah. We will use try catch eventually, but possibly not this week. Any other questions? Yeah.
Can you explain the cache part again?
Yeah. So it's a really strange decision in my opinion, but by default, every time you use fetch in a Next.js app, they save the response. So like google.com/dogs, you get some dogs, right? An array of 10 dogs. And the next time you're in your application, you send that fetch request, the same one, it doesn't ask Google again. It just has a local storage that it gives you the response. But what if the dogs change on the server? Then you're out of luck. So we override that by saying, where is it? By putting this extra property of cache no store, which is kind of annoying, but yeah, necessary for our application. So if we had an application where like the data rarely changed, then maybe it would make sense. But it doesn't make sense for this application.
So how would we make it so that the page, as soon as you click enter, the page will, instead of refreshing it, it would just have it appear in the list?
Oh, we're getting to that, yeah. So the one more UI we need to improve is what's wrong with this scenario still. So I click add message, right? And what don't I see?
The new message.
Yeah, we want to see the new message. So we have a hook called use router, which we're going to import from Next navigation. And this is going to be allow us to refresh the data in our application, specifically the fetch request. So here I can do router.refresh. And now will this refresh? Hopefully. I click add message. Ooh, and it didn't work. Oh, I did this in the wrong place. Router.refresh. This will work, I'm sure. Click add message. And there we go. This will work, I'm sure. Yeah, any questions?
Is there a way to do this just by calling, like if we were to lift the get request to the parent, like the page, would we be able to pass the get messages as a prop to new message and then just run that under the handle submit somehow? Or is this the best way to do it, the router version?
So this isn't even in a function right now. I guess we could wrap this in a function and then pass that down, but it's easier just to use router.refresh, I guess. Yeah. But what you're proposing wouldn't work, I don't think, because we're using the messages here. And if we pass this function down and we invoke this function again, this isn't going to be refreshed without us specifically using router refresh. So router refresh basically reruns this component, this server component. Yeah.
So router refresh fetches.
Well, it reruns this component and this component fetches. So yeah.
Can you explain why it works even though it's in a different function? Like why is it rerun messages even though it's in the new message component?
Oh, that's kind of the black box of Next.js, how it's functioning behind the scenes. Yeah. Yeah, but that hook is specifically for this purpose, the user router. So this one.
Got you.
So that's coming from Next. So they're doing all that magic. Then the one other refactor here, so this div is going to become very big with all the different things you need to do with your messages, editing, liking, deleting. So what makes sense is to have a new component here called message. And we're going to export default function message. And right now we'll just return a div that says message. And then here, instead of returning this div, I want to return the message component. And now how can I fix this? So I still want it to have the actual message.
Pass the pop.
Yeah, so what prop do I pass?
Value?
No, nothing called value right here.
Info. Oh, message.
Yeah, message is what I want to pass. This one. So I call it message and the value is
Message.
message, yeah. So now in this component, I have access to props like always, and on props, what object will be there, what property? It will be message. So how can I destructure the message object from the props object?
You can put curly brace and put message in there.
Yeah. So now I have access to the message. And now here I can do message.text. So I'm not going to give you this code today because this is a kind of a big chunk of the project. So you're going to have to recreate this. But this is kind of a good start. So try to absorb the organization of this roughly, you know. What questions do you have? Okay. Also, I'm going to work on the newer version of Spammer. I can't explain to you how frustrated I was this morning trying to get it working. But anyway, I'm going to try to get it working. And so Spammer might be upgraded slightly, but it won't affect hardly anything today.
Max, is this our weekly project or what? What is this
Yeah,
exactly?
you have the whole week.
To work on this week. Okay.
Yeah.
And still do Monday. Okay.
Yeah.
I just had a question about the API quick.
Sure.
So when we update it like on our own computer, it'll update the entire API, right? So
Yeah.
like if we add messages. Okay.
Yeah. So it'll be a free for all. Everybody will see. Yeah. So nothing crazy on there. Last class, it was surprisingly good. We didn't have any problems. But yeah, everybody will see your messages.
It can get a little confusing because everybody like seems to pick the same message to try to test with.
Oh, yeah, testing 1, 2, 3.
So if you see that your message appeared like 5 times, don't freak out. It just means somebody else thought of the same exact idea. So try to pick a message that I would suggest to try to pick a message that is kind of unique as you're testing it out. That way you know which one is yours. You know what I mean?
I mean, you could also put like your name and then colon and then your message, then you'll know it's your own message.
It's not gonna be that crazy. But yeah, you guys will figure it out.
But we can also crash the server, right?
Not if I built my server well enough. I mean, unless you're really trying to crash it, like you do some while loop or something. Please don't. But yeah, I designed it so that no matter what weird error you do, it should let you know the error. So here, see, like there's, yeah, like it's telling you what you did wrong. On the new version, you can't do the same message twice. That will be an error. But here, I guess I didn't do that. I don't know why. Yeah.
The other thing is try catch. Are we not going to cover that before this project, or?
I don't think we need it on the front end. Yeah, so we'll cover it next week. Although, yeah, I don't know how much I'm going to lecture the rest of the week. So that's certainly a topic that we could hit on. Okay. I think that's good there. Any final thoughts or questions? All right. Let me get you in breakout rooms. Oh, I'm sorry. There is one other tool I want to talk about. So building a front end is, well, this tool is probably honestly more useful next week, but maybe you'll find use for it this week. There's a tool that emulates front-end requests called Thunder Client. So here you can basically, emulate your front end using this tool. So to show you, we can do a GET request for messages, and that's fine. But then we can even do a POST request to make a new message. And it's telling us you must provide a text field. So here we can do a body and say text, hi. And then we get the response right here. So instead of having to code out the whole app we just did, we can use Thunder Client to like mock a front end client. So I think this is more useful next week, but I did want to introduce it. It's going to be a very important tool moving forward. And you install this in extensions, Thunder Client. All right. If there's any questions, shout them out.
Hey, Max.
Yes.
Can we talk about the sequence of code inside of the so if you go back to your main code or any code not that we've been doing the fetching with.
Okay. Messages. Oh, sorry. Is this the code you wanted to look at or no?
Yeah, so basically I just want to talk about because the functions are all asynchronous, so the ones that have default async function, that means that all the lines in the code block are going to be done asynchronously. Is that right? Like if I try to console.log something in there, there's no guarantee that what it is I'm trying to look at is going to be there at any particular point in time. Is that right?
So if you console.log anything in here, it'll show up in the terminal. But your question is the ordering of things?
Yeah, the ordering of things, right?
Yeah. So I believe that's a good question. First off, all the server components, all the console.logs are going to run in the terminal. You'll see them there. And I believe all your parents will run before the children. But we can, this is a cool question to look at. So we can just do messages component right here. And we see messages component. And then here we can go one level up. And this is like our home component. So my guess is we see this before messages component, but let's see. So we see home component, then messages component, because this component is the parent. It's running first, and then it's rendering messages. Yeah. Is that kind of the question, or?
It is, but there's no guarantee, right? So the reason why a function is async is because it's waiting on something that could take a while, like a fetch.
Yeah.
So then I guess I'm just confused about how React batches things and then spits it back out for the program. Because honestly, I was running into a lot of issues with that yesterday. Like I thought I was getting certain values at a certain point in time, and I wasn't, yeah.
So the exact, like how Next.js is doing this behind the scenes, the exact timing of calling different functions and when it renders them and when it doesn't, and how often, like, is beyond my knowledge. That kind of detail of how Next.js is functioning behind the scenes.
I think it touches on from yesterday when we talked about what synchronous means and not asynchronous. when we did the synchronous, it was everything goes in order. So like if you had the code, it would go in order, so top to bottom, while asynchronous goes pretty much anyway, like grabs whatever goes faster first, I guess.
Yeah, so our synchronous code is always going to run first, no matter how nested a child it is. But we can... So home component is running before messages, right? But what if messages wasn't async? This is going to cause an error, but what if we take out the async? So I think home is still running before messages, even taking out the async. But I'm not entirely sure. It's kind of hard to see. Yeah, but so again, like how Next.js is functioning behind the scenes is very interesting, but it's not the level of detail you need to be cognizant of to have a working Next application. That's if you want to work on the Next team, developing Next. Any more questions? All right. Okay, rooms are open.